Welcome to Northwest Tech Show, the show where we talk about technology and how leveraging its power can help you achieve better results at home, at work, and in your civic engagements. We're going to start off today, as we like to do, with a little bit of Creative Commons from the good folks at twit.tv.
This is Twit.
So last week on Windows Weekly, we were bemoaning the fact that we've heard nothing from Microsoft lately about PWAs. It seemed like it was super exciting that they were all in on it, and then there just was nothing.
I'm secretly believing that my support of PWAs is what killed it.
Is that it?
Yeah, because if anytime I love technology too much, it dies. You know,
me too.
Windows
I
Phone,
loved it
Amiga,
too. I'm so excited by it.
I'm the killer of things.
So
but no, this week you've been the unveiler of things.
Oh, the unveiler of things.
There's good news.
Yeah. So let me just rifle through these real quick, and then we can kind of go back and go through it a little more deeply, because it was really interesting to watch this kind of happen in real time. I saw a report that's on Twitter. Someone on Twitter said, "Hey, I'm getting this prompt in Outlook.com that's letting me configure a Gmail account." Now, don't confuse this with you can go in and forward your Gmail to Outlook.com. It's literally you have an Outlook.com account and you have a Gmail account. You can switch between them. Like you can send and receive mail, Gmail, using the Outlook.com account. It even integrates with the calendar, Google Calendar, contacts, and Google Drive. Interesting. Now, I'm not seeing it. In fact, I'm still not seeing it. But that flipped a switch in my brain, because I have been saying for a while now, if Microsoft could just turn Outlook.com into a PWA, that wonderful web application could replace the terrible mail application that's built into Windows 10.
Yeah.
To which people retort very logically, well, that's not possible, Paul, because Outlook.com, the website, the web app, is only for Outlook.com email. There's no way to configure multiple accounts.
Ah, but now there is.
Yeah. My reply to that has been, but that's an arbitrary design. They could design Outlook.com so that it could connect to other accounts. And now it looks like they're testing it. Okay, so neat. But then in very rapid succession, I got an email from someone who said, "Hey, I'm using Outlook on the web. This is the Office 365 commercial version of Outlook.com. And I'm using Brave, that web browser you guys were talking about last week. And I just got an install prompt in the address bar. And that install prompt only appears when you have a PWA.
Yeah.
I thought, well, that's really interesting.
That's what that means. Yeah.
So I looked at it in the Edge beta, and I did not see the install button. But that's because I'm running the beta. If I was running Canary, I would have seen it. And it's coming. Obviously, it's coming. It's there. It is there. It's just that the beta version can't see it, or it doesn't work properly. And then of course now I'm looking at Outlook.com. Is Outlook.com going to switch over? Sure enough, you also now it was a day later. I think this prompt now appears also in Outlook.com. So Microsoft is turning these things into PWAs. Now there are no special PWA features like offline use or whatever, but they've done
is it really a PWA if you can't use it offline?
That's got to be coming, though, right?
Yeah, that's got to be. Because
you would think.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise it's just a window to a website.
Yeah.
Yes. Right, of course. But the point is they've done the work to do that. So now that the manifest is there, now that they have the basics, what I would call the minimum to qualify as a PWA, all those other things are possible. So we'll see what happens. But anyway, the point is they're doing it. Like after years, months of silence, certainly. And then there was a Microsoft. How did this one? Oh no! So someone in the Microsoft tech community, which is like an online forum, said, "Hey," and God knows how people find these things, but he's like screwing around with the flags and the Canary version of Edge, and he's like, "I found this flag that appears to make some changes with the way PWAs work." And a Microsoft engineer actually replied to him, apologized for not documenting it yet because he said we're a little bit behind, but he says, "Yeah, we're actually making changes to the way this thing works."
Would you now? The chat room is saying, "What is a PWA?" Perhaps we've launched into this without explaining. We've talked about it quite a bit, but not everybody. Yeah. Partly confusing, also because of WP.
UWP.
UWP. PWA. PTA.
Guys, what's the tech webcast? The podcast. We're going to use acronyms. So PWA is a progressive web app.
Using web technologies like JavaScript.
Ultimately.
Yeah.
that has there's basically a standard by which this website can appear to look like and work like a native app on platforms that support it. Android and Windows 10 natively support PWAs. You typically acquire them through a browser. There'll be some kind of an install experience like the one I just described. Microsoft has added the capability to install them through the Microsoft Store. So the Twitter the Twitter app in the Windows Store, the Microsoft Store, is actually a PWA. Google has said that they will do so for Android as well. Samsung supports them in its own browser and on its phones. Apple is going down that path a little more slowly because obviously Apple has a big foot in the the native app experience on iOS especially, but also on the Mac. But you could run Chrome on the Mac or the new Edge on the Mac and get these PWAs as well. So it's and then there's a list of native experiences that you can add. So the two big ones in my mind are offline use, which for an email app is somewhat important. I mean, obviously when you're sending and receiving emails, you're online typically. For an app like Twitter, it's same thing. You pretty much want to be online to use it. But you can imagine you can make a PWA of anything. It could be a task app. It could be a game. It could be whatever.
Twitter, in fact, is the PWA most people are familiar with because they've been doing that for a long time. In fact,
and you might not even realize that's what it is.
Right.
Right. Like the Office app, when you go to office.com and you can see your most recent files, that's a PWA also. The new Microsoft Office app.
The one that's in the store, the Windows 10 app.
Yeah.
That's right.
So when I'm on Twitter.com, I should be able to install it. There should be a menu item that says install.
If you don't see it, go to mobile.twitter.com.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So, but the other main one that I can think of, the other important thing is native notifications. So in other words, web apps like websites can pop up notifications, but they're browser notifications. They're whatever the browser you're using. You could do something really screwy, by the way, if you wanted to. I've done this. I mean, you could have Chrome, you could have the new Edge, you could have Brave. You could go to the same website on all three of them, install that thing as an app, and then have three different versions of the app. They should all look identical, but they're running on a different back end, right? The different browser. So the thing Microsoft's doing in Windows 10 in some future release is they're going to enable more low-level. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't say the other thing. The other feature I think that's important is native notification. So if you have like Outlook.com as a PWA and you have a new email, the notification that will pop up will be a Windows 10 notification on Windows 10, right? It won't be in like a browser notification. It will look just like and work just like every other notification that you get natively. So it's like, for all intents and purposes, this thing is a native app.
So this is so I just did that in Brave. I went to mobile.twitter.com. I got the little install thing in Brave. It shows up in the URL bar. And this is it. And so this is a standalone application that is Twitter. I mean, but
it's write once, run everywhere, or write once, run everywhere, whatever the term was.
But so, I mean, how is this different than just a frame into Twitter in the browser?
Yeah. So for Twitter, it's probably not that different. But you have to understand the benefit of this for Twitter and also for users, but is they only have to do this thing once, right? The world of just a few years ago was you needed a different team or a different set of people making a Windows app, a Mac app, a Linux app if you did it, an Android app, an iOS app. One of the nice things about PWAs is that you can write that app once and it's going to work everywhere. Yeah. It's the same app. You don't write little. There will eventually be things for certain native features because there will be native features that only work or make sense on Windows that maybe you don't support on other platforms or whatever, like jump list. But for the most part, it's not about, if then blocks, like if it's on iOS, do this. If it's on, you don't have to worry about that stuff. It's just, it's a web app. It will work and look and be the same everywhere. Yeah. And there are huge benefits to that.
Yeah.
Also, just from a deployment perspective or like an updating perspective, and this benefits the users. If they discover a problem and they update that thing, it's not, you don't have to uninstall a version, reinstall, or install an update, or go through, this is happening for you in the background. You don't have to worry about it.
So what would be the difference between an Outlook.com PWA and an Outlook for the web PWA?
Nothing. It's just the audience they're targeting. So those
the
two
functionality
apps
is the same.
Well, basically, I mean, there probably are differences because Outlook on the web is for commercial customers, and there'll be business features built into that you won't see in Outlook.com.
Right.
But that would, so in
But
other words, at some
fundamentally-
point, we might have the entire Office suite as
Yes,
a
this has been the
progressive
That
web
was
app.
the rumor, right? Wasn't that the rumor a year ago? They were going to turn everything in the office into a PWA.
So the thing, you're right. So remember, they for a while they worked on these mobile apps, the ones you could get in the store, and they were kind of offshoots of the work that Microsoft had done previously to bring mobile Office first to Windows Phone, and then of course there's iOS and Android versions as well. And so you could run that thing on full Windows. It was a subset of the full capability of the main apps, as it would be. But the problem, I think, was that the underlying technology that was available to those apps was not powerful enough to, for this to make a ton of sense. Plus, the phone thing failed. I think that played a role in that.
And they put those apps in maintenance mode basically now, right? Like they're not doing anything with those anymore.
Right. So a
yeah.
web app version of Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and whatever other apps, OneNote, whatever, is probably good enough for most users.
So I just went to office.com, opened Outlook, and I'm getting an install button.
Yeah, in Brave you will. Yep.
So it is now a PWA officially.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it's
but not in the new Edge, right? Like you're not seeing that yet.
If you're in Canary, you will see it. You don't see it in beta.
So Chrome and Brave, you would see it. I don't know about Safari, but in other words, that's more an issue of browser capabilities than what Microsoft has done. They've made this a PWA now. This is
It's the basic PWA, right? Like I said, it doesn't support any special features. It's just meeting the minimums. But that's okay because that's the step. Now we know they're doing it, So eventually we'll probably see these additional capabilities added.
And you're listening to Northwest Tech Show on KMUZ. That was a Creative Commons clip from the good folks at twit.tv. That was Windows Weekly 649 Progressive Web App Support. I'm Dave Duncan. I'm joined today in the studio by Nate Darnell.
Hey.
And John Anderson.
Hello there.
Good to have you here, John, for the first time.
Nice to be here.
And John is works at a software development house, so I thought we might give him a chance before we get into an interview with him later, maybe just sort of his perspective on progressive web apps.
So, progressive web apps are something I've been following for a while, haven't had a chance to get to play directly with. Really interesting idea, but somewhat limited, I think, in direct application for. So one of the things we do a lot at Infinity Interactive, where I work, is we get approached by people to do mobile app development, and people are very interested in getting an application on iOS and Android without having to have two completely separate code bases. And so PWAs are potentially a nice solution for that problem. Except that they're not really well supported in the iOS ecosystem at this point in time. So we haven't really had a chance to do a deep dive into them. A lot of our work has been more around there's a technology called Xamarin, which is a Microsoft product that lets you have a single code base that builds out to a native app on both sides. And so we focus more on that. But PWAs are interesting in that the underlying technologies are a little bit easier to deal with. It's more native web stuff that that we're used to doing from doing websites. Xamarin requires you to write in .NET and C#, and it's a little bit of a higher technical bar to get into.
Yeah, I know that historically it was a bit farther of a bridge to cross to do something write once, run everywhere, because the systems were so different. And it seems like over time, at least for Windows and Mac, they've started to converge. Now there's another convergence, like everything's trying to look like the phones.
Yeah. The interesting thing about Xamarin actually is the technology was originally developed by a company called Ximian, which is a company that was started by a guy named Miguel de Icaza, who was big in the GNOME project, open source desktop project. He actually did a internship at Microsoft when he was a student, fell in love with the .NET runtime, and ended up producing a clean room re-implemented version of the .NET runtime. It's called Mono.
He did Mono?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, Ximian did Mono, and Ximian was his company. Ximian got acquired by Oracle, kind of spun around inside Oracle for a couple of years, and somehow got spit back out in a way into a new company that was called Xamarin that allowed them to, they retained the IP rights to Mono somehow. And then, like a couple of years ago, Microsoft acquired them. So the underlying Mono technology, you can run Microsoft recently, within the last year, as part of open sourcing .NET, you can run .NET on Linux or a Mac, and the technology that powers that underneath is that same Mono runtime. That's what makes that all possible, and that's what underlies the Xamarin code that runs on iOS and Android too, is that same underlying Mono runtime.
It's good to know that that's out there. I mean, of course, this is the dream, is to write once, have it play everywhere. When they start that Mono started out with Java, I think.
Yeah.
It's like, it's like that XKCD cartoon about, there's 14 competing standards. Let's take care of this. 3 months later, 15. Now we have 15 competing standards.
The trade-off is always between sort of ease of implementation and how well it fits in with the native platform.
Yeah.
And whether it looks like a citizen of the platform, because I don't think I don't think Android users are quite as persnickety, because I don't think there's quite as strong a set of common UI expectations over there. But iOS people, hardcore iOS users, want things to look like an iOS app. And so if you have something that doesn't meet that expectation, you're going to get bad reviews. It's not going to be popular. Yeah,
the general Android and iOS approaches are kind of like, the hybrid muscle car versus the Lamborghini. It's like just like the one true way to do it, and the other one's just like, hey, let's throw together all these different technologies, whatever works. So and then they both have good appeal.
Yeah.
It's like I want some freedom to do some wide experimentation or do my own stuff. Android, only way to go. If you want something, it's like, I don't want to know how it works, and I don't want to get viruses or malware on my thing. I'll just go iOS or Apple or whatever. They generally, it's not so much that it's innately better. It's just that it's a smaller target surface, and so people that want to do malware, they're not going to go there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a different set of trade-offs.
Yeah, very much so. All right, well, let's get to the main topic. The reason that inspired me to bring you in is I had been kind of working in the wilderness many years, trying to find the tech community and just assuming it didn't exist in Salem. And then one day on Meetup, I found Hack Salem and was rather chagrined that this really well-developed group had been running for many years. So tell us a little bit about the history of Hack Salem.
So I moved to Salem from the East Coast in August of 2012. And had been living in the Maryland suburbs outside the D.C. region, and was used to going to 3 or 4 different technical meetups every month in D.C. or in the Maryland area. And some of them were more social, and some of them were more technically focused. But I kind of had my nerd socialization outlet scene. And I work from home. I've worked from home for going on 10 years now. And so having the meetups is sort of a social outlet. If you are, I could not leave my house all day and not see anybody I'm not related to.
And it's on the side, it's a little cross-pollination because you get exposed to what else is going on in the field.
Yeah. So we moved out here. My wife got a job in the area. I work from home. So we relocated, and I kind of landed and kind of looked around, and like you were saying, kind of said, where's the tech scene? There's got to be something. It's the state capital. I'm pretty sure there's some tech workers here. And, obviously Portland is an hour away, has a very vibrant technical meetup scene. You could go to a different meetup every night of the week.
Yeah.
Every night of the month.
But it's an hour away. And one of the reasons we wanted to move to Salem was the commuting situation in the D.C. area is horrible. So I was really not anxious to get in the car and, drive up to Portland for an hour. In addition to dealing with, my wife works, my kids at that point were not old enough to be left at home alone. So it was a whole coordination thing in order to leave Salem in time to get to the meetup in Portland. And so kind of looked around, couldn't find anything, and thought, well, I'm just going to start something. Put a note on meetup.com. We had our first meeting in December of 2012. The group was originally called, and I
I'm usually at work not allowed to name things. The group was originally called the Salem, Oregon Dynamic Language Users Group.
Oh, no.
Which
How many people showed up for that?
So honestly, the first meetup, we had probably 30, 35 people show up. It was held in the now defunct Clockworks Cafe
that was a great
downtown.
location. Yeah.
We met in one of the bigger back rooms and pretty much filled the U-shaped table in there. And Clockworks went out of business like 3 days later.
No correlation there.
Connection there, as far as I know. But we had that original meetup, and one of the people that came, it was someone who was at the time she was a training coordinator for the local multiple listing service. And when we were looking for additional places to meet, she said, "Actually, I can, you can meet here after hours as long as I'm around." And I kind of like hanging out with you people. So thanks to her generosity, that really enabled I think that was the main critical component to the success, was just being able to find a place that had projectors that was willing to let us use it without charging us.
Yeah. Just a really pleasant room.
Nice room, great place, convenient sort of central location kind of by the airport. So we've been doing that for not necessarily every month, but most months for the last 7 years. We've either had a technical meeting, which features one or two talks. I like short talks, so I try to encourage people to give like a 20 to 30-minute talk. Sometimes we'll have somebody who really wants to do a longer talk. So we'll have one that's maybe an hour long. And sometimes we just have what we call social meetings, where we meet up at a coffee shop or a bar and just kind of hang out. We usually end up at a local watering hole after the technical talks, too. We call it networking.
Yeah, just like they do in the Valley.
Exactly. So it's been really great. There is a technical community in Salem. It's not huge, but we've got a core group of 10 people that show up pretty much every month, and another 10 to 20 will show up at any given meetup, depending on their availability and their interest in the topics.
Yeah, I was really blown away by the really interesting, rich composition. A lot of work at home tech types, Western Oregon students, in process or recently graduated.
Yep.
Go around and introduce everybody and say, okay, and who's hiring? And it's like, it had a lot of multifunction. It was social, and it was career advancing. And I think you said on a couple occasions, part of the purpose of the talks was to give people a chance to develop their ability to give talks at conferences. And how does that help advance a career?
Definitely. So, I mean, I do a moderate amount of conference speaking. It's kind of part of my job to be out promoting the company, both in terms of trying to find us work. If anybody needs any software developed, give me a call. And also just because we, in terms of hiring, it's good for people to know me, because that way if I'm like, hey, I need a .NET programmer, I might know some people to call that I met at a conference. And the nice thing about speaking at a conference is usually if you speak at a conference, you don't have to pay to attend it.
Oh, nice. Yeah. And they can get really spendy, too.
They can get really spendy.
Yeah, I don't know.
You generally still end up covering your own travel, although that's changing, too. There are more conferences that are covering speaker travel and accommodation. So it's a good way to attend conferences. It's a good way to meet people. It's good for your sort of personal brand. And it's just a overall good thing if you are not, it's not a requirement by any means. Some people are not public speakers. But it's an interesting thing to do. It's generally good for your career, but it's hard to get started in. It's super intimidating for a lot of people to just think about how I would go about, I've never done this before.
Yeah.
What do I do?
And to do it in an environment where you're kind of comfortable with the people you've seen month after month, that's a
Right.
great place to start.
Yeah. So I need to do a better job of documenting this and sort of writing it down and putting it on the website. But one of the visions of the group was sort of a farm league for speakers, right? A way to dip your toe in, find out maybe you like it, maybe you don't. Low commitment, low stress, because if you bomb, who cares? We've definitely had some talks that were less good than others. But
That talk could have been way shorter.
Yes.
Yeah, for a short talk of any quality is very tolerable. It's like people are very generous. It's like, hey, it's just good to hear someone new speak.
Yeah, I love hearing people talk about things that they are excited about.
Yeah.
It doesn't even really matter what the topic is. We've had a fairly eclectic collection of
Mushroom
topics.
hunting,
Yeah. People always ask, well, what should I talk about? Like, you should talk about something that you're excited about. We do have one guy who's a sort of an amateur mycologist, fungus hunter, mushroom hunter, who's given a couple of different talks that are largely just photos of like, hey, I was out in the woods and found this thing, and then I went and looked it up and took a spore print, and I'm pretty sure it's this thing that won't kill me, but it might be this other thing that will destroy my liver.
Yeah.
So I ate it.
And I'm still here.
So it was this one. It's,
there was going to be, all right. And now on a parallel note, can you tell us about a little group called Willamette Valley Software Engineers and what you know about them?
So the Willamette Valley Software Engineers is another local technical meetup. I think they're 3 or 4 years old. I don't remember exactly when they started. I wasn't prepared for the quiz. They started up, was a guy named Angelo Seminary and one of the tech people at Maps Credit Union wanted sort of the same origin story. They were like, we need more technical community in Salem. We want to have a group. And they went out on meetup.com and they saw Hack Salem. Because we had changed the name by that time from the horrible, I won't say it again, to Hack Salem. And they saw that and thought, oh, this is a group about hacking, about breaking into computers.
Right. So
that's not what we want to do. We're professional software engineers. We want to have a professional software development meetup.
And so they went on to recreate almost exactly the same thing you were doing.
Almost, yeah, pretty close.
Slightly more white shirt and tie crowd, but...
They always kind of rejected the image when I would say, they're the khakis and button-down group, and we're the open source hippies. But it's not even actually that true anymore. I think there's a pretty strong core overlap between the two groups. I'd see a lot of the same faces at the two.
And I've only been to a couple of meetings, but generally the talks were like, oh, we brought in this guy from Microsoft. He's giving us this deep dive on .NET.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, that's kind of, to me, was like, okay, that's the IBM Pocket Protector crowd a little bit. But it's Salem.
Yeah.
So it is almost the same people.
One of the founders, Angelo Seminary, was an owner and a tech recruiter at a company called IT Motives that does technical recruiting in the mid-Willamette Valley. Angelo passed away recently at the end of last year, but he was extremely active in the Portland technical scene, went to a lot of meetups up there, and he would recruit people from, he'd see somebody give a talk at a Portland meetup and say, hey, you want to come down to Salem and do that same talk?
And that's how that happened. Okay.
And that's how, and he had a lot of contacts at Microsoft. He was a good friend of Scott Hanselman, who's huge in the .NET world and Microsoft open source in general. And so he would get Scott to come down once a year. And
I saw one of those talks. I was like, oh, that's a heavy hitter.
Yeah. But a lot of Portland area people would make the trek down from Salem, which I love. I love to see people moving in the opposite direction.
Sure.
They've had that. They pretty consistently meet at the Maps Administrative Building, just around the corner from here. So that's been a nice, stable location for them. But with Angela's passing, the other people who are currently running the group were a little daunted at the notion of having to corral talks.
Yes.
And so we sat down and
thus the big change in direction for the Salem tech scene.
We sat down and this aligned. I had been already thinking about trying to kind of take Hack Salem in a different direction, because frankly, after doing it for 7 years, the grind of having to try to wrangle finding a location and finding speakers and not really feeling comfortable with getting people to commit to preparing a talk, and then at the last minute have to say, oh, you can't give it because we don't have a place with a projector. Sorry, we're going to a bar. So I've been thinking about kind of doing something a little bit different. The current organizers, Brent and Julie, approached me, and we sat down and kind of talked, and what we kind of ended up with at the end of that conversation was we're going to keep having one meetup a month. I think we're still kind of up in the air about whether we're calling it Hack Salem or WVSE or something else. That'll be 1 or 2 technical talks at the MAPS location where WVSE has been held for the past few years. And then the Hack Salem meeting will kind of float around the month. So it won't be, Hack Salem has traditionally always been the second Wednesday. And one of the biggest pieces of scheduling feedback I've had from people is, oh, I can't ever come because Wednesday nights just don't work for me. I have the kids, or that's when my shift is, or whatever. So we're going to have another meeting that's kind of not on a fixed day of the month, not at a fixed location. It'll be different every month. I think this month it's probably going to be the 25th of January. Not sure where yet. We're just going to let it move around within the month, and it's just going to be 2 or 3 hours of, hey, some people are going to gather at this place and hack on stuff, write some code or work on a website or, do background research or just sit there and drink coffee and be social. And kind of try to have those two halves of the experience that have sometimes 1 month it's technical, sometimes a different month it's social. We're going to do both each month, kind of. Have some talks and have some social hangout time. And we'll see how that works out.
So the traditional location for the Hack Salem, is that still going to be a place?
It might. Our contact there told me that she was still interested in hosting from time to time, but I have to think after 7 years not having me email and say, hey, can we meet there?
Yeah.
I want to give her a little bit of a break. But yeah, we'll probably still be there sometimes.
There's also the fact that she's kind of a fan of the community, so it's like it's not a horrible thing for them to come to your yard.
Yes, exactly.
It's like, bring it all to me.
Yeah, we will definitely be back there. I'm not sure when. Like I said, this is all nascent.
Yeah.
Still kind of trying to figure some of this out. And one of the definitely, and this is all on me, one of the hallmarks of Hack Salem has been what I would call a just-in-time approach to many, many things. It's mainly me going, oh, crap, it's Monday, and Meetup just sent me the email telling me that I'm hosting something on Thursday, and I've done nothing.
In which case, having a stable location was kind of nice. It's like people just show up and expect something to be there.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of inertia. But, okay, so now with this sort of merge, there's a little bit of a rebranding going on. So you acquired a not active yet, but...
Not active yet. One of the things that I'm going to get set up in 2020, so a little background for folks who don't know, Meetup.com was acquired sometime last year, I'm not sure when, by WeWork.
Dun, dun, dun.
And WeWork has been making some changes that some people, including myself, find a little alarming in how Meetup works. So Meetup is already, if you organize something on Meetup, you are already paying a subscription fee. And Hack Salem has a large number of people who are members of the group. We're over 800 people. I don't know why. Yeah. I don't know where all of them are, because they're certainly not coming to the meetups.
And that's for across the board for meetup groups. It's like people will just like, I like that concept. I'm part of 10 meetups in Portland that I could never get to, but it's like I would really like to get there someday, and so I've joined them.
Sure. And there are 2 subscription tiers, but the subscription tiers depend on the number of people in your group.
Yeah, so it costs you sometimes to have those extra people.
I think once you get over 200 people, it goes up to, I think I pay around $90 every 6 months to host that on Meetup.com, which I was happy doing. But then when Meetup started floating ideas like, oh, we're going to charge people $1 to RSVP to attend your Meetup, at that point I was like, yeah, no. And I have a friend, Michael Hall, who I've met through conference speaking, who has written a software package called Get Together that's available at gettogether.community that's effectively an open source Meetup replacement. It's free to use currently. He covers the hosting cost with Patreon. But the interesting thing about gettogether.community is it's designed to federate. It's designed so that people can run their own instance of it, and they'll all sort of sync up and exchange data. So it's not a centralized system like Meetup. As far as I know, no one has taken him up on that and started up a second instance, but it is something I'm planning on doing in 2020. So I've registered salemtech.community. Eventually, we're going to have an instance of Get Together running there. It'll be available for Salem area groups that are, subject to some code of conduct that I haven't also written yet because I don't.
That will be a long way of saying don't be a jerk.
Don't be a jerk, no Nazis. Yeah,
nice.
Because
Okay.
it's 2020
So that's not
and we have to say that now apparently. But yeah, it'll be open to we were at the Salem Makerspace monthly social event last night, and I was talking to a fellow who was saying, "Yeah, I'm part of a local emergency preparedness group,
Yeah.
and we're having trouble organizing on Meetup." And I was like, "You're welcome to use this once it's up and once it exists."
And by the way, thank you, because for the last 6 months or so, you've also been putting the Spark Studio Salem Makerspace under the umbrella of your account, because it's like you had the ability to do multiple groups for the same price. But then when you start charging for RSVP, that changes a lot.
And
more
they
than doubles the price, really.
They walked that back, but at any faith I had in the new stewardship of the company was pretty much destroyed at that point. So the 2020 is sort of, I just recently restarted my own weblog. I'm a fairly big Twitter user, but I'm making plans to try to kind of get off of that, or at least start syndicating content into Twitter that I originally published somewhere else.
Have you messed around with Mastodon at all?
I'm on Mastodon.
Because that's federated Twitter, basically.
It's federated Twitter. I'm on Mastodon. One of the other sort of, once I get salemtech.community, once I get the get-together part running, the other sort of long-range plan is to set up a Salem-specific Mastodon instance under that same domain. So we'd have, social.salemtech.community, something like that. And we have do we talk about the thing that we have? Or do we make people come to the meetups to find out about the thing that we have?
Right, yeah.
We've got that, but I'm not a fan of that particular platform for open source communities. I don't like the limited message retention, and I don't like I don't like not knowing what that company is doing with that data we're giving it.
Which one is this? Is Slack?
Slack,
yeah.
I mean, fine company. We use it at work. It's a great product for work. I don't think it's a great product for open source communities.
I think we've kind of gone through a generation of, oh, look at this awesome free thing that we're giving you, and now we'll pull the strings now that we've got your data siloed. And that's happening so much over and over. People are getting a little fatigued.
It's been I'm an old, so I've been on the internet a long time, and I remember
I've seen this before.
I remember the open, I remember AOL, and then the pendulum kind of swung away to the open web, and we had kind of the
Usenet and
late 90s, early 2000s weblog revolution kind of thing, and now things have kind of, the pendulum swung fully all the way back to these centralized walled gardens of Facebook and Twitter and Slack. And I'm ready to start trying to pull the pendulum back towards the other side.
Well, at least on the small ones, they can be very risky in a lot of different ways, because sometimes when they pull up stakes, they say, and we want to destroy all the data we've gathered for legal reasons.
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh, the laws change. We have liability now for any content that was posted. Safer for us just to destroy it and pretend it never existed and make things hard for people who are trying to archive it, like the archive.org web archive teams going in there and trying to grab things from these services are dying, and now they're actively throwing roadblocks in their way.
Yahoo shutting down Yahoo groups and told them they couldn't download.
I mean, that was huge for over a decade. I mean, that was the best way to do groups that was free.
Wait, what's the rationale behind Yahoo shutting down Yahoo groups?
Presumably, it's not making them money.
Well, and it was something that was coasting for a long time, and then some new laws were coming down the pike where they would have some liability for any arguably adult content on there. And so they're just like, okay, we'll just make it go away, and then we won't have the liability. I think that's what's going on. They never said. They just said, oh, we're closing it down, and then we're also mysteriously making it really, we're like shutting down the accounts of anyone who's trying to download stuff.
Yeah.
You know? So that was unpleasant. And they're the trustee of the data. It's not, they didn't create it.
And Google shut down Google Plus because it was just too late to start. Is that, or in comparison to the others that already?
I'm not
had?
entirely sure. They have a history of shutting things down if they're not wildly successful.
Google just I think Google has a short attention span as a corporation. So they do things and they're like, okay, we did that. We're bored now. We're going to turn it off.
The unfortunate thing was there were some amazing communities on Google+. Just the fact that they had failed to make it super accessible, it was very rich in early adopters. And all the, the perpetual summer types that come in never arrived to mess things up. And so they were kind of enjoying this kind of throwback to the early days of the internet where there weren't any trolls, or weren't very many of them.
Yeah, I noped out of Google Plus fairly early when they instituted the real name.
Oh, the real name policy.
That was the point where I was like, nope.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, your real name we don't accept as a real name.
Yeah.
It's too American Indian or something for us.
There's a great weblog article that you can Google that's something like 50 falsehoods programmers believe about names. So
Yeah.
if you are responsible for writing any sort of software that stores people's names, you should read that article and think about it.
And there's a similar one for anyone who thinks that the Social Security numbers are a unique identifier. It's like, let me tell you about wallets that came out that had a pre-printed Social Security number card, and lots of people just used that.
Yep.
Just kept them in their wallet. And many other stories like that. It's like the world is a lot weirder than you think.
Oh, yeah.
Dates, right?
Dates.
That's handling dates properly. That's like several volumes.
There's not going to be a leap second at the end of June this year.
No.
No.
Oh.
They announced that recently, which means that up until this point, you haven't actually been able to specify a really accurate to the second specific date time for the last half of this year, because you didn't know whether there was going to be a leap second or not. But now you do.
Yeah, I hope you didn't have anything that was super time critical.
Yeah, one of the jokes we tell at work is one of the ways you can tell a really experienced programmer is if you ask them an interview question about time zones. The really experienced programmers will just like insult you, flip the desk, and leave.
It's like, stop that man. He's good people. All right. Well, so that's where we'll leave it, I think. So we have coming up this month, we have January 25th as the proposed
social. And
time.
I'll once I get the logistics of that figured out, I'll put it on the meetup page.
Okay.
We also have the regular technical meeting is tomorrow.
Oh, good. So that's still on.
That's still on. We're meeting at the MAPS location, and the details are at meetup.com/hacksalem, all one word. We've got 2 talks. Duncan Beavers, who's a local developer, is giving a talk called Terminal Tomfoolery.
Ah, nice.
That's all about doing crazy stuff in your terminal with ASCII animation type stuff. And I'm doing a talk that I think I put the title as Terraforming a Static Website for Fun and Profit. It's about using an automation framework called Terraform that lets you automatically set up stuff in the cloud to set up a static website on Amazon S3 so that it's really cheap to run and you get SSL free out of the box from Amazon. They make you a certificate. They keep it renewed. And I figured out I pieced together a bunch of stuff, and I'm going to talk about doing that.
Oh, that sounds fun. Yeah, that is the kind of talk that I've come to love Hack Salem for. So looking forward to that. So that's tomorrow night at the multi-use.
7 p.m.
7 p.m. All right. Okay, so we'll move on to the next clip here. This is going to be a Creative Commons clip from the good folks at twit.tv, Triangulation 423, with a different approach to web browsing in the enterprise.
This is Twit. Tell me about Authenticate. What is the idea here?
So it's an incredibly simple idea, but it's what we say obvious in hindsight. If you think about what a web browser does, every time you view a page, you go to a destination on the web, you're requesting a big blob of code written by some third party and intermingled with all kinds of other third party code like ad networks or activity trackers or whatever. You suck that down the wire and you bring it into your local computer, and your browser will execute it. It will assemble the page. It will programmatically execute modern usability widgets, scrolling information feeds or pull down menus, watch videos, whatever. All of that is done programmatically at your computer. And we looked at this, coming out of my previous company. We were really looking at this from the perspective of the corporate user and administrators trying to control the environment. And we realized that the protocols aren't going to change. You're not going to be able to embed better security or management into the protocols. You're not going to be able to configure the device because more and more people are moving to a BYOD environment. And this proliferation of cloud-based applications means a lot of times the data that you're trying to control lives on servers that are managed by another third party. And so our whole idea, in simple words, was execute the browser on a server you can control rather than trying to patch all the endpoints all around the endpoints. So we build what's called a cloud browser. You use our browser, it's executing up in the cloud. It's configured with a variety of policies and entitlements and security capabilities, but the user gets basically a real-time display of that browser session to their endpoint.
But it's a harmless stream.
It's
not
an
all
encrypted,
the potential
benign
garbage.
That's exactly
so
right.
This is kind of like what Google's doing with Stadia, Microsoft's doing with xCloud.
It's what OnLive did with games before Stadia came.
The idea is you render the game on the server, and so none of that hard work is done on your computer. And in the case of the internet, none of the security risks are executed on your machine. You just have a stream. Or
the attribution. The attribution is important as well, because if there's somebody tracking you or trying to identify who you are, the IP terminates at Amazon or Google or wherever we're hosting our infrastructure. And so you also get anonymity when you're online. So you're not touching anything, and you're not exposing your IP, your location, or anything like that. But to be fair, virtualization is not new. Virtualization's been around for dozens of years. What we did is use virtualization as a means to an end. The real important stuff I think that we're doing, and the reason the company is called Authenticate and not, jumbo virtualization or something like that, is because we think that the combination of security through this idea of virtualization, identity and access management, or simply said, password management, and data policies gives you this holistic environment for controlling how cloud-based applications are used, particularly sensitive cloud-based applications, banking information, corporate resources, et cetera. You can basically move all of the things that might be exposed either to a malicious person or a user that might make a mistake, and you can put all of the policies to control that in the browser itself. And that allows all of those policies to follow the user regardless of device, regardless of network, regardless of location. The browser becomes the centrally managed asset. Totally secure, totally anonymous, and policy control.
So every time these kinds of things come up, people say, well, wait a minute, that's what we used to have, was this thin client, a terminal, and the computer was over there. And then the whole revolution, the whole personal computer revolution was one desk, one CPU, your own personal little computer that you can do anything.
Decentralized.
Right. And now it sounds like we're going back to the old day of a thin client and all the work being done in the cloud. Is it really regression, or are we making progress?
And you're listening to Northwest Tech Show on KMUZ. That was a Creative Commons clip from the good folks at twit.tv. That was Triangulation 423, a different approach to web browsing in the enterprise. I'm Dave Duncan. I'm joined by John Anderson.
Hello.
And so this is not the first time we've seen, trying to virtualize your computing experience in the cloud. What you had something that you'd seen before?
Yeah, I've seen products from VMware that allow people to do this. I've seen, if you want to talk about thin clients, one of the most interesting things was back in the early 2000s. I was a government contractor at NIH. And we had several, Sun had this product called the Sunblade. Did you ever see Sunblade? So it was this little computer terminal about the size of a 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper and about, a couple inches wide. And that was the thing that sat on your desk, and it was connected to your monitor. But all it was basically a remote terminal. Your actual compute session was running on a server somewhere in the data center, and they had these little cards that were, had a little chip on them, and you'd put the card into any Sunblade, and your session would pop up. You could log in and be logged in. You could pull that card out, walk across the room to somebody else's desk, stick it in the one on their desk, and bam, your session was back.
The weird thing this reminds me of is the Nextcubes. The idea was, they had that optical disc that was so huge for the time was, hey, you just take your whole environment and take it with you to any Nextcube.
Yeah. It was same basic idea, and very low latency, worked really well, was easy to maintain because all the sessions were actually running on like one or two really beefy Sun servers in the data center. So you were only doing maintenance in that one place.
Right.
You didn't have the situation where it was like, yeah, nobody can log into their desktop today because it's Windows patch day and all the desktops are updating and it's killing the network, right?
Yeah.
There were a lot of advantages that, unfortunately, it was very late in Sun's lifespan. So they had this really great idea, but were not in a yeah, it was really too late to do anything about it. But
yeah, that was the problem. There were some great early ideas. Palm.
yeah,
It's like it's kind of familiar these days. They were doing it back before the infrastructure would really support
or
it.
even if you go back, Newton,
Oh, Newton, yeah.
right?
The base design prototype for a lot of stuff that came
Yeah.
later.
You can chase that particular thread all the way back to what they call the mother of all demos, which was the Xerox PARC first introduction of GUI computing.
You want us to show what to Steve Jobs?
Yeah. But it's interesting. We were talking in the segment before about sort of the pendulum swinging between the open web
Yeah.
and walled gardens. I think this is another sort of pendulum kind of thing. Towards the end of that segment, they were saying, that we had this big push towards decentralized individual usage of CPUs. Is this just moving us back to the data center?
People didn't want to manage their computers.
And it's all trade. There's no silver bullets. There's no perfect solution. Like, this is the mature wisdom. There's no one size fits all. It's all trade-offs. One of the things I've been working on at work for the past couple of years, on and off, is kind of documenting our approach to things and policies and procedures, and it's this document that's never going to be finished called the Infinity Way.
We're a living document,
which
they
is
call them. Yeah.
pretentious. But one of the jokes about it is, like, if you ask me a question about anything in a professional context, my answer is going to be, well, it depends. So the Infinity Way is just 300 pages of 72-point type of it depends. And so that's, you see these things that are sort of the pendulum swinging between decentralized individual compute and centralized shared resources. And it's just the overall perception of the trade-offs changing and what, seems more valuable at the time. At some point, we will all swing back to, nobody has local compute and everything's running in the cloud, and then something will happen that makes it seem advantageous to have more local resources. So.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what the frustration with terminals was how limited it was, because everything, the downside of having your computer 1,000 miles away is you can't plug in your USB cord.
Right.
So it's just like, okay, you've got keys and you've got phosphors and that's it. And so I was like, okay, now we got something local and we're doing all this stuff, and now I'm getting viruses and all sorts of crazy stuff. And my my mail client's always crashing. Oh, here comes Gmail.
Yeah.
And G calendars. Oh, isn't this great? And then they start doing all these customized mining of our material, and we start to get a little nervous about how much we've given away. And
yes,
it's like, okay, I guess now when you're designing products for clients, that's probably one of the things is like, okay, how much am I controlling my content versus maybe something to be more efficient to put in the cloud, but do I want to do that?
Yeah. And what are the security implications of putting it in the cloud? Like, if it's out there, on the internet, you need to secure it. Versus something, if you've got a content management system that you're using to maintain a website and you keep it local, the security posture is totally different. Versus having that content management system out in the cloud somewhere on some computer that you may not own.
Yeah, like the rise of the static web generators, right? Yeah. It's like, hack this. It's not there. There's nothing there. You have a lot of static pages to hack that can be instantly replaced.
We've had a static website at work for years. I've insisted on it because we have a weblog. It's not as active as it should be, but we do publish content out there and then we share it out. And I'm like, always, we might write something great and it ends up on Hacker News, it ends up on Reddit. We don't, as a consulting company making software and deploying websites for people, we don't want to be in a situation where our website is down because it's falling over under load. Static website Apache's a really great piece of software.
Very low overhead for delivering text.
It'll serve pages a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, it's just the integrity of your content. Sometimes the only place something exists is on your website, and if someone gets in there and starts monkeying with it, your history has been altered.
Oh, our website's in revision control. Come on, Dave.
No, but it's not all in the cloud.
No, it's not all in the cloud. It's in different clouds.
It's in different clouds. And that's another good distinction. You don't necessarily put all your eggs in one basket.
Definitely not.
Yeah, and have very good connectivity between baskets. Okay, well, we're getting down to the bottom of the hour, so I think it's time to say you've done it again. You spent an hour talking about technology with David and Nate and John, and just building that awareness of the more you know about technology as a force amplifier, the better results you're going to get at home, at work, and in your civic engagement. So I hope you'll join us to continue this conversation next Wednesday and every Wednesday, noon to 1 o'clock, for Northwest Tech Show.